are many words one can use to describe the films of French auteur Claire Denis, but perhaps the most appropriate of these words would be lyrical and reflective. Throughout Denis' varied career, we have witnessed her deep dive into formalist and sensual cinematic worlds, for she has always sought to confront the clichés and expected standards of the cinematic conventions. Denis is a filmmaker who wishes to tackle our sensibilities head-on and subvert them. This is something that is perhaps never emphasized better than in her rhythmic and tragic magnum opus, Beau Travail. An allegorical tale of revenge and desire, Denis' film is partly adapted from Herman Melville's partially unfinished novella Billy Budd's Sailor, and follows a former French Legion officer as he recalls his previous experience leading the troops in Eastern Africa. Although this plot may seem to be one of minimalism on the surface, it is in the film's subtext where Denis interlaces her true thematic messages and connotations. Having spent much of her career working with fairly personal themes regarding colonialism and identity, when one studies the world present within Beau Travail, we can see that these are once again the ideals central to Denis' vision. Despite appearing to feature a plethora of familiar conventions and techniques, like all of her works, Denis seeks to challenge and disrupt the expectations of her audience, thus subverting the traditional patterns of film viewing by employing approaches that attempt to destabilize these. This is something evidenced by Beau Travail's unorthodox narrative structure and the unexpectedly meditative approach to what we would understand to be typically intense accounts of masculine life and experience. This ideal of masculine convention is something that is often subverted throughout Beau Travail, with Denis clearly choosing to deconstruct the audience's preconceived notions of what they know about manhood. This is done through the film's study of the violent and culminative elements of the male psyche, which are fitting against the backdrop of nationalism and perfection on display within the images of the French Foreign Legion we see on screen. All of the characters within Beau Travail are suppressed in one way or another, so perhaps it isn't any surprise to see why Denis chose to present her story with a distant perspective, one that is both non-linear and emotionally withdrawn. This is something that is often criticized about the male identity itself, as well as the anti-expressive philosophy upheld by the standards of many established male gender norms, which Denis exploits and critiques within her unconventional approach to Beau Travail. The rhythmic poetry of cinematic form and movement is something also deployed by Denis throughout Beau Travail, as she embarks on her filmic pursuit of masculine deconstruction. In the numerous sequences of male-on-male movement and activity, Denis presents these apparent alien militaristic procedures like a dance, in turn evoking beauty rather than violence, and sensuality rather than intensity. Choreographed by ballet dancer Bernardo Montet, it is these scenes that distinguish Beau Travail from other cinematic studies of militaristic life. For these legionnaires live their lives with a clear rhythm and tempo that translates through their body and their mind. This presentation of the legionnaires is one of intrigue and of significant purpose, given that the experience of being a foreigner in this strange land has caused these men to become disconnected from themselves and to those around them. This central idea of identity and mythos is something that has existed throughout the entirety of Denis' career and can be traced all the way back to her varied upbringing in Africa under the guidance of her colonial officer father. captured in the sun-drenched East African landscape, these soldiers are witnessed in their poetic and rawest forms, existing in an ambiguous world, a perspective of manhood that is perhaps best showcased by the female perspective Denis adds to the tale of Beau Travail. This approach fits into the category of cinematic poetry, in which very little is handed to the audience, and rather the film engulfs you into its atmosphere, creating a transcendent experience filled with vast cinematic elements. Once saying that capturing bodies on film is the only thing that interests her, Claire Denis' alluring imagery is offered up in turn with remarkable ambiguity and visceral power. This power is emphasized by the film's use of transcendent close-ups and homoerotic undertones, which seeks to distance themselves once again from our narrative expectations and rather demonstrate a trance-like world filled with allegory. Bringing a bold female gaze to this heavy masculine world, Denis' perspective does bring to the table a sense of natural sensuality and visual pleasure, something that is often lacking from a cinematic world that is often dominated by the male gaze. With this in mind, it is clear to see why Denis chose to immerse her voice into this repressed and counteracting male story, thus creating this radical film about men as seen through the eyes of women. Alongside her frequently collaborating cinematographer, Agnes Godard, we can see that Denis doesn't just seem intent to glorify and rejoice in the male form here. She intends to dissect it, in turn shattering the dynamics of all male groups and the insecurity that lies deep within them. And even though these men are perhaps witnesses objects, Denis' gaze is far more than that, as she seems determined to showcase this illusion under a perceived tone of regret and loneliness. Although one may link the idea of cinematic gaze with voyeuristic urges, the female gaze offered within Beau Travail is a stark exception to this, for this is a gaze void of persuasion and tradition, existing beyond the realms of gender itself, and ultimately invokes a subtle, eroticized, and allegorical sense. With each study of this masterwork, one cannot help but feel a sense of fulfillment and passion when discussing it. Denis has crafted something special with Beau Travail, daring to tackle such weighty humanist and even biblical themes, and doing so with unmatched grace and nuance. When dissecting this work, one can't help but be blown away by this masterful film, and the sheer subtlety and patient style Denis brings to the table. By depicting masculinity through the eyes of the female gaze, Denis has done something wholly unique with Beau Travail, capturing control, desolation, and repression with an aura of mysticism and eroticism. Accompanied by her textured sound design and transcendent staging and long shots, Denis has crafted a work of true cinema with Beau Travail, deconstructing the very concept of masculinity in the process.